Silence swallowed the underground room like the lid of a coffin being sealed. Green felt tables stretched across the concrete basement beneath the Grandview Hotel, stacks of cash scattered like confetti across surfaces worth more than most people earned in a year. Cigar smoke hung thick in the air, a blue-gray fog that caught the light from chandeliers dripping crystal. But nobody was counting money anymore. Nobody was smoking. Nobody was breathing normally. Nicholas Bianchi lay on his back on the cold concrete floor, blood pooling beneath him in a spreading dark circle. His tailored black suit, custom-made in Milan, torn open at the chest. His white shirt underneath soaked crimson. The man who built an empire from the streets of Los Angeles, who clawed out of poverty with his bare hands and reshaped the entire underworld through sheer will and ruthlessness, was dying in front of 12 armed guards who could do absolutely nothing. A bullet meant for someone else. A deal gone catastrophically wrong. Now this. Rocco knelt beside him, trembling. Rocco, who had pulled a trigger without hesitation 17 times in his career, whose hands had never shaken once in 15 years of service, now had hands that would not stop shaking. His voice cracked like broken glass. "Boss, stay with us. Stay with us." Dario was on the radio screaming for the hotel doctor. The doctor arrived within 90 seconds, Dr. Chen, pale and sweating, his hands fumbling with medical supplies. He pressed gauze against the wound. The gauze turned red immediately. Then darker. Then almost black. "Blood loss," Dr. Chen said, his voice barely steady. "Significant blood loss. The bullet nicked an artery. We need a hospital. We need surgery now." "No hospital," Nicholas whispered. His voice still carried that deep, solid quality, like an oath spoken from the grave. "No witnesses. No records. Then he will die," Dr. Chen said flatly. "Without a transfusion, without surgery, without getting him to intensive care in the next." He checked his watch, his hand shaking worse than Rocco's. "In the next 12 minutes, he will die on this floor." Rocco's jaw clenched. Dario looked away. Both men understood the mathematics of mortality. Both men understood that sometimes the most powerful person in the room was powerless against the clock. Then footsteps. Not the heavy footsteps of the guards. Not the measured pace of someone who belonged in this room. Quick footsteps, light footsteps, the footsteps of someone running. Mia Hartley pushed through the circle of armed men like a blade through silk. Her uniform was stained with sweat from the heat outside, from the 6 miles she had walked to reach this hotel for her shift. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had started to fall apart hours ago. She was 29 years old, but her eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who had lived 40. Her name tag read MIA, delivery, in small black letters. She had been bringing documents up from the first floor when the alarm sounded. She had worked at the Grandview long enough to know which sounds meant run and which sounds meant hide. This one sounded like die. She did not ask what had happened. She did not ask who this man was. She looked at the blood, at the doctor's face, at Rocco kneeling there with tears streaming down his face, and something inside her that had been dulled by years of survival suddenly sharpened into a single point of purpose. "What's his blood type?" she said. Dr. Chen looked at her like she had appeared out of thin air. "How did you? What is his blood type?" "AB negative. It's rare. We have maybe 1 unit in the hotel safe from the last emergency transfusion, but..." "I have it," Mia said. "I have that blood type." Rocco stared at her. Dario stared at her. Dr. Chen stared at her. For one suspended moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody breathed. Mia was already rolling up her sleeve. She had rolled up her sleeves 10,000 times in her life. Rolled them up to scrub dishes at 4 in the morning. Rolled them up to wash floors on her hands and knees. Rolled them up to work double shifts that left her arms aching from elbow to wrist. But never like this. Never with this absolute certainty that whatever happened next would matter. The needle went in. Her blood, drawn from her arm, began flowing through the tubing toward Nicholas Bianchi. Bright red, undeniable, alive. The blood of a woman who walked 6 miles in the summer heat to earn money she desperately needed. The blood of a woman who had $78 to her name and 7 days before a foreclosure notice became a legal eviction. The blood of a woman who saw a dying stranger and did not hesitate. The color began to return to Nicholas's face. Slowly. His breathing deepened. His eyes, which had been rolling back into unconsciousness, began to focus again. The heart monitor that Dr. Chen had attached started to find a steadier rhythm. Not stable. Not safe. But alive. Alive was something. When the transfusion finished, when the needle came out of her arm and Dr. Chen pressed gauze against the small puncture wound, Mia sat back against the wall. She felt dizzy. She felt like she had given something away that she would never get back. She felt like she had just saved the life of a stranger and somehow that would cost her more than she had already paid. She did not know who this man was. She did not know that the man bleeding on the concrete floor in front of her was Nicholas Bianchi, 41 years old, born in the worst neighborhood in Los Angeles, a man who had clawed his way out of poverty and built an empire through darkness and blood and a code of honor that only his most trusted lieutenants understood. She did not know that her blood type, AB negative, so rare that maybe 1 in 1,000 people carried it, was worth more than gold in his world. She did not know that she had just changed everything. But what she could not have predicted, what nobody in that room could have anticipated, was that this moment, this single moment of mercy in an underground room filled with violence, would somehow unravel every mystery she had been running from for the past 5 years. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone you love who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. These are the stories that remind us we are never truly alone, no matter how dark the road becomes. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Let us go back to the morning that started everything. Now let us rewind. Let us go back to 7 hours earlier, to the moment when Mia Hartley counted $78 in crumpled bills and knew, with absolute certainty, that it would not be enough. The alarm on her phone went off at 4:17 in the morning. The screen glowed pale blue in the darkness of the shelter room she shared with her 2 children. She silenced it before the sound could wake them. Emma was asleep in the cot beside her, 6 years old, her small hand thrown across the pillow. Marcus was in the other cot, 8, his breathing deep and even, the kind of sleep that only children could manage, the forgetting of everything that hurt during the day. Mia lay there in the dark and listened to them breathe. She was supposed to feel grateful for this shelter. The volunteers told her that every time she checked in. You are so lucky to have a safe place. Lucky. She rolled the word around in her mouth like a stone. Lucky would be a working car. Lucky would be a job that paid more than $9 an hour. Lucky would be a manager who did not corner her in supply closets and run his hands along her waist while telling her that gratitude came in many forms. She got out of bed without waking them. She wore the same clothes she had worn yesterday and the day before that. Her delivery uniform was clean, at least. She had washed it in the shelter sink last night and hung it to dry on the radiator. The fabric was thin from so many washings, almost translucent in places, but it was clean. The shower at the shelter was down the hall. Cold water only. Mia stood under it for 3 minutes, the kind of short shower that conserved resources and did not draw the attention of the daytime staff who resented people who used too much hot water. The cold made her gasp. The cold made her feel alive. She sat on the edge of her cot and pulled out the envelope from under her pillow. $78 in crumpled bills. 150. 2 10s. 1 5. 3 1s. She counted them 3 times. The number did not change. $78. That was grocery money for 4 days if she bought only rice and canned beans. That was bus fare for 6 days. That was the amount she needed to earn money with, and money always cost something. On the desk beside her cot was the envelope. The white envelope with official stamps and red letters that said final notice. The foreclosure notice. The house that her mother had left her, the one place in the world that was supposed to be hers, was going to belong to the bank in exactly 7 days. 7 days. $35,000 to prevent it. She had $78. The mathematics was simple. The mathematics was impossible. Emma stirred in her sleep. Her small hand reached out, looking for Mia's hand. Mia took it, held it, felt the weight of her daughter's trust in her palm. This was why she walked 6 miles in the summer heat. This was why she worked shifts that left her standing so long her feet went numb. This was why she had learned to smile at men who looked at her like she was something they could own. At 5:30, she kissed both children on their foreheads. Marcus did not wake. Emma's eyes flickered open for just a moment, confused and reaching, and Mia whispered, "Sleep, baby. Mama will be back." The streets of Los Angeles at 6 in the morning belong to people with nowhere else to go and people rushing to jobs that barely paid enough to survive them. The summer heat was already climbing. By the time she reached the Grandview Hotel at 6:45, having walked 6 miles in that heat, sweat was running down her back and her calves were throbbing. The back entrance to the hotel was where delivery drivers went. Mia was not a driver. She was a delivery person, which meant she walked. She carried packages to rooms, carried documents to the offices upstairs, carried the burden of her own necessity in every step. Her uniform hung loose on her frame. She had lost weight in the past 6 months. Not on purpose. On necessity. Douglas Hale was already there, waiting by the storage room. Douglas Hale, 46 years old, with expensive cologne that did not hide the smell of sweat underneath, with a suit that cost more than Mia earned in 2 months, with eyes that had learned early that the world belonged to people like him and women like Mia were inventory. He looked at her like she was late, even though she was early. "You're working the underground deliveries today," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced. "The poker game goes all night. They need refreshments. You're good with refreshments." Mia nodded. The underground room meant extra tips if the men were generous. It also meant hours alone in closed spaces with men whose worth was calculated in violence and cash. It meant learning to make her body small and her presence invisible. "And Mia?" Douglas smiled. His teeth were very white. "Very expensive. Don't wear that bracelet down there." She was wearing the small silver bracelet her mother had left her. Just a thin, delicate thing. Nothing valuable. Everything precious. "It's not a display piece," Douglas said. "It's not meant for their eyes. Take it off." She took it off in the storage room, her hands moving before her mind could argue. She put it in her locker with the $78 and the foreclosure notice. She put the most important things she owned in a metal box and locked them away. At 7 o'clock in the morning, Mia Hartley descended the stairs into the underground poker room beneath the Grandview Hotel. She had no way of knowing that her life had just become a clock counting down to a moment that would change everything. She had no way of knowing that in exactly 6 hours and 47 minutes, a bullet meant for someone else would create a vacuum that her blood would be called to fill. She had no way of knowing that sometimes one hand reached out at exactly the right moment can change an entire life. The alarm clock reads for 16 a.m. The numbers glow sickly green in the darkness of the women's shelter on East 7th Street, and Mia Hartley's eyes snap open before the sound even registers. She has trained her body to wake at this hour, to steal these minutes of quiet before her children stir, before the fluorescent lights flicker on and the shelter transforms into a place of managed chaos and collective desperation. She sits up slowly on the thin mattress. Her spine cracks. Everything cracks these days. The bathroom is 3 doors down. Mia moves through the darkness like a ghost, barefoot, careful not to disturb the other families sleeping in the dormitory. She counts 6 cots. 7. 8. Each one holds a story of collapse, of circumstances that conspire to force good people into rooms that smell like industrial cleaner and broken dreams. She locks the bathroom door and counts her money under the harsh fluorescent light. $78. This is everything. This is the sum total of her entire existence in the world. She spreads the bills and coins across the bathroom sink like an archaeologist examining artifacts. 3 20s. A 10. 8 ones. The rest in coins that catch the light and throw it back at her accusingly. $78 to keep her children fed until the next paycheck. $78 to buy time before the foreclosure notice becomes a reality. The foreclosure notice. The one stamped in red letters that sits in her locker at the Grandview Hotel like a ticking bomb. Final notice. $35,000 in 7 days or the bank takes everything. She had saved for 3 years. 3 years of extra shifts, of eating the leftover food from the hotel garbage bins after the customers left, of telling her children that water with lemon was a special treat, not a substitute for a meal. 3 years of working toward the small apartment on Maple Street, the one with the yellow kitchen and the window that looked out onto a tree. A tree. Such a small thing to want. The apartment was supposed to be her family's anchor. Instead, it had become the thing pulling them under. Mia returns the money to her purse. She puts on her uniform, a white button-up shirt with a stain on the collar that will not wash out, black pants with a fray at the hem, shoes that used to be white and are now the color of dirty water. She braids her dark hair back tightly. She cannot afford to look like she is falling apart, even though she is. At 5:48 a.m., she wakes Emma and Thomas. Emma is 6, with her mother's dark eyes and a mouth that asks questions constantly. "Mama, is today a home day?" She asks this every morning. She has been asking for 8 months, and the answer has never changed. "Not yet, baby. We are still at the shelter. But you're going to school, and I'm going to work, and tonight we will read stories together." Thomas, 4, doesn't ask questions anymore. He just looks at her with an expression that no 4-year-old should possess. Acceptance. The kind that comes from understanding, on some cellular level, that the world is not set up for people like him. They eat breakfast in the shelter cafeteria. Oatmeal that tastes like cardboard. Milk that is almost expired. Mia watches her children eat and counts the money in her head again. $78. 8 more days until the next paycheck. If she doesn't spend anything, if she stretches every penny, if she performs miracles with mathematics, she might have enough to make the next payment. The shelter van drops Emma at school at 8:15 a.m. Emma presses her face against the window as they pull away from the elementary school, and Mia watches her daughter until she disappears around the corner. The same goodbye every morning. The same knot in her chest. Thomas stays at the shelter daycare. The workers know him now. They barely look up when Mia hands him over to a woman named Patricia, who has kind eyes but hands that are always full of other people's children. "Have a good day, sweet boy," Patricia says, and Thomas nods solemnly and walks to the corner where the other children are building something out of plastic blocks. Mia leaves the shelter at 9:15 a.m. The walk to the Grandview Hotel is 6 miles. She has done it 247 times. She has counted. 6 miles through Los Angeles in the summer heat, through neighborhoods that grow increasingly prosperous the farther east she walks. The buildings change. The cars change. The people on the streets change from people who look like her to people who look like they have never counted money in their entire lives. The heat is already brutal at 9:41 in the morning. The thermometer on the bank building reads 87 degrees. By noon it will be 95. Mia walks with her purse clutched against her body and her eyes forward. She has learned not to make eye contact. Not to draw attention. Not to exist in a way that might make someone notice her. By the time she reaches the Grandview Hotel at 10:06 a.m., sweat has soaked through her uniform. It clings to her back like a second skin. Her feet ache. Her head throbs from dehydration, but she cannot afford to buy water. She counted wrong. There are only $73 now, not 78. She must have miscounted. Or she spent money she forgot about. Douglas Hale is waiting in the employee corridor when she arrives. He is always waiting. He moves through the hotel like he owns it, and in some sense he does. He manages the restaurant, the bar, the underground room where the serious money flows. He is 43 years old with slicked back hair that glistens with some kind of product, and he has the kind of smile that appears on his face but never reaches his eyes. "You're late, Hartley," he says. His voice is smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who has never been told no in his entire life. "I'm actually early, Mr. Hale. My shift doesn't start until—" "You're late the moment I say you're late." He steps closer. She can smell his cologne, something expensive and cloying. "You understand how the world works, don't you? How things function in places like this?" She does not respond. Good jobs are hard to find, especially for women with your situation. His hand moves toward her waist, and she steps backward, and her shoulders hit the wall of the supply closet they are standing in. His fingers brush the fabric of her shirt. "I could make your life much easier. Better tips. Better hours. Better everything. All you have to do is be nice to me." Mia clutches the stack of napkins she is holding. They are white and clean and do not belong in this conversation. "I need to get back to work, Mr. Hale," she says. Her voice does not tremble. She has trained it not to. "Of course. Just remember who controls the schedule here. Who decides if you work tomorrow or next week or at all?" He smiles again, and this time his teeth show. "We understand each other." She nods because she cannot afford to do anything else. That night, when she counts her tips at the end of her shift, the jar contains $17. She remembers counting $43 before her break. Before Douglas came into the kitchen and looked at her with that expression. Before anything could be left unguarded. The money is gone. She stares at the $17 and does not cry, because her tears have dried up somewhere between the shelter on East 7th and this moment, and she has learned that crying at work is a luxury that women like her cannot afford. At midnight, Mia returns to the shelter. She walks past the desk where a security guard nods at her without really seeing her, up the stairs to the dormitory where her children sleep. Emma is curled on her side, her small hand still gripping the pencil she was using for homework. Thomas is sprawled across his cot like he has surrendered to gravity itself. Mia sits on the edge of Emma's bed and does not touch her daughter because she is afraid that if she starts touching her, she will not be able to stop, and her child will wake up to the sound of her mother breaking. The foreclosure notice sits in her locker at the Grandview Hotel. She sees it every day. $35,000 in 7 days or the bank takes everything. She has $73 and counting down. Across the city, in an office on the 42nd floor of a building that overlooks downtown Los Angeles, Nicholas Bianchi sits behind a desk made of black marble and studies a photograph. The girl in the image is 6 years old. She has dark eyes and a serious expression. She is holding a piece of paper that says Emma in careful first-grade letters. Emma. His daughter. The child his ex-wife Victoria took from him 5 years ago and disappeared into the city like smoke. He has been searching for her every day since. Nicholas is 38 years old, and he looks like a man carved from stone. He is tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair silvered slightly at the temples. A scar runs from his left eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of a night when he was 22 and decided to take his life back from the people who thought they owned it. He wears an expensive charcoal suit, tailored to his exact measurements, and a gold watch worth more than most people's houses. On his desk sits a stack of reports. Missing persons. Custody violations. Locations where Victoria might be hiding. Every resource he has, and he has unlimited resources, has been directed toward finding his daughter. Rocco, his oldest lieutenant, stands by the window overlooking the city. Rocco is 52, with grey threading through his dark hair and the bearing of a man who has survived things that should not have let him survive. The foster care system has no record of her, Rocco says quietly. If Victoria took her, she kept her off the grid. Private schooling. No hospitals. No paper trail. She has to be somewhere, Nicholas says. His voice is deep and solid like an oath. Children leave traces. Doctors. Teachers. Someone has seen her. We will find her, Rocco says. We always do. Nicholas does not respond. He is thinking about the day Victoria told him she was pregnant. About the hospital, the weight of his daughter in his arms, the feeling of holding something so impossibly fragile that it terrified him. About the moment, 3 days later, when he came home to an empty house and a note that said, "I cannot raise our daughter in your world. When she is old enough to understand what you are, she will hate you. I am preventing that. He has been preventing nothing. He has been losing everything. Meanwhile, the night deepens around Mia Hartley as she lies awake on her cot, calculating numbers that do not add up, waiting for dawn to arrive so she can begin the whole terrible cycle again. The fluorescent lights in the shelter hum like trapped insects. Somewhere down the hallway, a baby cries. Someone else's baby, someone else's catastrophe. She does not know that in exactly 4 days, something will tear open in the underground room beneath the Grandview Hotel. She does not know that her hands will move faster than her fear. She does not know that a stranger's blood will change everything, that one small moment of courage will set in motion events that no one could have predicted. She does not know that sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. For now, she just counts the hours until morning comes and she has to do it all again. The fluorescent lights of the shelter hummed like trapped insects as the night deepened. Mia sat beneath one, a single bare bulb casting everything in sickly yellow, and she counted the crumpled bills in her trembling hands for the 3rd time that evening. $78. That was all. $78 between her children and the street. The paper lay on the table beside the money, creased and water-stained from being read so many times the words had started to blur. Final notice. The bank would foreclose in 7 days. 7 days for $35,000 to materialize from nothing, from air, from the impossible mathematics of survival. Emma played with wooden blocks in the corner, stacking them with the careful concentration of a 5-year-old, her dark curls falling across her forehead. Thomas, 7, was already asleep on the cot they shared, his chest rising and falling with the innocence of children who did not yet understand what foreclosure meant, what it meant to lose everything. Mia folded the bills back into her pocket. The lamp's light caught the outline of her face, the hollow cheeks, the premature lines around her eyes. She had worked 16 hours that day. 16 hours for $80 and a handful of coins left by drunk men who believed that exhaustion was not a person but a service. At the Grandview Hotel, in the kitchen where she had scrubbed plates until her hands bled, Douglas Hale had watched her leave with that expression he always wore. The manager was 53, built like something that had been compressed and hardened, with a smile that never reached his eyes. His suit cost more than she made in a month. His cologne, expensive and suffocating, seemed to mark everything he touched. 2 months earlier, in a place she was never supposed to go, something had happened that she did not fully understand. The basement. The poker room with its green felt tables and armed men whose suits cost more than everything she owned. A man lying on the floor with blood pooling beneath him like spilled wine. The hotel doctor's voice, sharp with urgency, AB negative. He needs a donor in minutes or he dies. Mia had stepped forward without thinking. Her hands had moved faster than her fear. She had sat in a folding chair while her blood moved through plastic tubing into a stranger's arm, watching his color return, watching death retreat from his face. When it was finished, a man with scarred knuckles had tried to hand her an envelope thick with cash. "For your help," he had said. She had shaken her head. "I want to go home to my kids." She had left before they could stop her, walked 6 miles through the dark with her headlight and her vision swimming, thinking only of Thomas and Emma waiting in the shelter, thinking of nothing else at all. Now, 2 months later, that stranger's face had returned to her mind because his name had appeared on a document delivered to the shelter's director. Nicholas Bianchi. Owner of properties across Los Angeles. Philanthropist. And something else, something the other residents whispered about in the hallways. Something dangerous. The knock on the shelter's door came on a Tuesday afternoon when the sun was sharp and white and the city sprawled beyond the windows like something sleeping. Mia was sitting at her usual table, counting coins again, watching Emma color pictures of flowers that would never wilt. A man entered. He was tall, built like something carved from stone, wearing a suit so perfectly tailored that it moved with him like second skin. His dark hair was silvered at the temples. His eyes were the color of storm clouds. A thin scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, and when he moved through the shelter's common room, the air seemed to compress around him, and every sound, every voice, every footstep, seemed to hold its breath. The director rushed to greet him, nervousness written across her face in quick, stuttering movements. "Mr. Bianchi, welcome. Thank you for considering our organization. Your donation would mean everything to us." Nicholas did not respond immediately. His gaze had fixed on something across the room. On Emma, specifically. On the little girl with dark curls and green eyes, the same green eyes that stared back at him from every mirror in his house. His hand clenched at his side. Rocco, standing 2 steps behind, saw it and said nothing, but his jaw tightened. In 15 years of working for Nicholas Bianchi, Rocco had learned to read the smallest shifts in his boss's body language the way other men read sentences. This was different. This was something new. Emma looked up from her coloring and made eye contact with the tall man in the expensive suit. She studied him for 3 seconds with the unfiltered assessment of a young child, then returned to her picture, having reached whatever conclusion children reach about strangers. The moment broke. Nicholas exhaled slowly. "That child," he said to the director, and his voice was deeper than thunder. "Who is she?" "Oh, that is Emma. Her mother works at the Grandview Hotel. They have been staying with us for about 3 months now. The mother is trying to save money, but circumstances have made it difficult." Nicholas nodded. The muscles in his jaw worked. "And the father?" "Unknown. She came to us alone." He did not ask any other questions. Instead, he pulled out a checkbook, wrote a number that made the director's eyes widen, and handed it over. "I would like to make a significant donation. Also, I would like to arrange a meeting with the mother." The director looked confused. "Miss Hartley? She should be back within the hour. Is there something specific?" "Just arrange it." Rocco and Dario exchanged a look. In the car, on the way back to the compound, Rocco would say quietly, "Boss, you want to tell me what that was about?" Nicholas would not answer. Instead, he would make a phone call to his intelligence team. Run a complete background on Mia Hartley. Employment history. Financial records. Medical records. Everything. And I want DNA confirmation by tomorrow morning. 1 hour later, Mia returned to the shelter carrying groceries that had cost her $19, nearly a quarter of her remaining money. She was still in her work clothes from the hotel, a gray uniform now stained with coffee and the smell of someone else's dinner clinging to the fabric. The director approached her immediately. "Miss Hartley, you have a visitor. He is waiting in my office." Fear moved through Mia like cold water. She had done nothing wrong, but fear was a habit now, something that lived in her chest and woke whenever someone in authority approached. She straightened her uniform and walked to the office, her calloused hands already moving to smooth her hair. Nicholas sat in the director's chair, which seemed too small for him. He stood when she entered, and Mia's breath caught. She knew him. Not from her life, but from that night 2 months ago. The memory was fragmented. He had been covered in blood, unconscious, his face a blur of pale skin and dark hair. But now, seeing him upright and entire and looking directly at her with those storm-colored eyes, recognition crashed through her. "You," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I am Nicholas Bianchi." Mia's instinct was to leave. To turn and walk out because men like this, men who wore suits that cost more than her annual rent, did not sit in shelter offices to thank working women for saving their lives. Something else happened instead. Something that made her stay. "I know who you are," she said. Her voice trembled like a candle in the wind, but she did not move. Nicholas leaned forward slightly. His hands were large, scarred across the knuckles, and he kept them visible on the desk, a deliberate choice, she understood, meant to put her at ease. It did not. But it was the gesture of someone trying. 2 months ago, in the basement of the Grandview Hotel, you gave your blood to save my life. You did not ask who I was. You did not ask for payment. You simply acted when everyone else froze. I do not remember your face, Mia said. No. You would not. I was dying on that floor. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the sounds of the shelter continued, children's voices, the creak of floorboards, the hum of old air conditioning working too hard in summer heat. Why are you here? Mia asked. Because I collect my debts, Ms. Hartley. And you gave me the greatest debt I have ever owed. Nicholas pulled a folder from his jacket and slid it across the desk. Your bank has a foreclosure notice dated 7 days from today. The amount due is $35,000. Mia felt the world tilt. I have arranged for that debt to be paid. The notice will be withdrawn tomorrow morning. She did not touch the folder. She could not. Her hands had begun to shake. Why would you do this? Why would you help me? I am nobody. You are not nobody, Nicholas said, and his voice was solid and sure like an oath. You are the woman who chose another person's life over her fear. There are very few people in this world who do that. You are exceptional. Mia stood up. I cannot accept this. I will not be in debt to someone like you. Someone like me. A criminal. A dangerous man. Everyone knows what the name Bianchi means in this city. Nicholas did not argue. Instead, he said quietly, I was born in the basement of a restaurant in Naples. My father was a drunk who beat my mother every night. When I was 8 years old, he beat her so severely that she died. I watched her die. I became what I am because I decided that no child would ever suffer like I did. I have spent 27 years making sure that children in this city have options. That families do not starve. That women are not disposable. He paused. You saved my life, Ms. Hartley. Let me save yours. It is not charity. It is what I owe. Mia's eyes had filled with tears, but she did not cry. Instead, she picked up the folder. The shelter seemed very quiet suddenly. Emma's voice calling Mama from the common room broke the moment. Nicholas watched as Mia moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back, and met his eyes. Thank you, she said. For the first time in a long time, thank you. She left, and Nicholas sat alone in the office, thinking about how the universe sometimes conspires to answer prayers you did not know you were making. His daughter was safe. She was real. She was alive. But what he did not understand was that love and danger are sometimes the same thing, and that the debt he had just incurred would cost him far more than $35,000 could ever measure. The supply closet smelled like industrial bleach and wet cardboard. Rain hammered against the small window near the ceiling, and every few seconds lightning turned everything white, surgical white, exposing every corner where Mia Hartley had hidden herself. The hotel's electrical system groaned and flickered. Thunder shook the metal shelves, rattling bottles of glass cleaner and stacked linens that smelled like yesterday's guests and tomorrow's forgotten shifts. Mia was restocking towels when Douglas Hale blocked the doorway. He had been waiting for her, she realized. His shirt was unbuttoned to his chest despite the air conditioning. His manager's badge hung crooked. In his left hand he held a stack of credit card receipts, her receipts from the shift, the ones where guests had tipped in cash that never made it to her pocket. You have been a problem, Hartley. His voice moved slow, like oil spreading across water. Complaining about the tips. Giving me looks. Refusing to stay late. I think it is time you learned your place. Mia's hands froze on the towel she was holding. Mr. Hale, please. I just want to do my job. Your job is whatever I say it is. He stepped forward, and the closet became smaller. The air became thinner. You think you can waltz in here, ignore my instructions, Pretend you are better than this work. You are a nobody. Do you understand? Nothing. He was 3 feet away now. His cologne smelled like wet dog and desperation. His eyes had that glassy quality they got around midnight, 2 glasses of whiskey down, inhibitions melting like ice in summer heat. Mia backed against the metal shelving. Bottles rattled. A container of fabric softener tumbled to the floor. Touch me and I scream. Douglas laughed. The sound echoed in the small space, competing with the thunder that shook the building again. Scream all you want. No one will hear over the storm. The ballroom is 3 floors up. The laundry room is closed. It is just you and me in here, and nobody is coming to save a girl who is nobody. He reached for her wrist. Outside, in the rain-soaked parking lot 6 stories below, Nicholas Bianchi sat in the back of a black Mercedes. His hands held a photograph of Emma, taken last week at the shelter. She was drawing something. Her tongue poked out slightly in concentration. He had memorized every detail of her face in the past 3 days, the exact shape of her nose, the way her hair fell across her forehead, the small scar above her left eyebrow from a fall when she was 2 years old. Rocco sat in the driver's seat, monitoring communications. Dario stood outside in the downpour, phone to his ear, water streaming down his face. They had been watching the hotel for hours because Nicholas had asked it. No reason given. In 15 years of serving him, they had learned not to ask for reasons. Then Rocco's head snapped up. Sir. A signal from inside. The emergency bell in the west corridor. Room 312. Nicholas was already moving, the photograph slipping from his hands onto the leather seat. He pushed out of the car into the rain. His cashmere coat, worth more than Mia's annual salary, absorbed water like a sponge. He did not care. The coat was a weapon now, just like everything else about him, designed to communicate power, wealth, untouchable distance. But that coat meant nothing if his daughter was in danger. He crossed the lobby at a walk, not a run. Running attracts attention. Rocco and Dario followed 3 steps behind. The night clerk looked up, saw them, and looked back down very quickly. People learned young that seeing Nicholas Bianchi was dangerous. Inside the supply closet, Mia screamed. It was not a scream of pain, not yet. It was a scream of defiance, a scream that said no, not this, not again. Her hand connected with Douglas's face, her fingernails drawing 3 parallel lines of blood from his cheekbone toward his jaw. He grabbed her other wrist, and the 2 of them tangled in the narrow space between shelves, between bottles and folded linens and the accumulated debris of 1,000 service shifts. The closet door exploded inward. Nicholas Bianchi filled the doorway. Water dripped from his suit jacket in steady streams. His eyes were something beyond anger, they were mathematical, calculating, seeing everything and forgetting nothing. He saw Douglas Hale's hands on Mia's wrist. He saw her chest heaving, her shirt torn at the collar, the red marks already rising on her neck like a map of violation. Douglas released her instantly and stumbled backward, crashing into a shelf. Bottles toppled and shattered on the tile floor, spreading pools of blue and green and amber. The smell of bleach intensified, choking. Who the hell are you? Douglas's voice cracked upward, panic replacing swagger in a single breath. Nicholas did not answer. His gaze moved to Mia. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak, her body still vibrating with adrenaline and fear and something else, the shock of rescue arriving exactly when rescue seemed impossible. Nicholas turned back to Douglas. Get out. This is my hotel. You cannot just come in here and... Rocco and Dario entered the closet behind Nicholas. The space became a tomb. Douglas's face went the color of old newspaper. Everyone in Los Angeles knew these men. They had seen them on the news standing behind Nicholas Bianchi during raids. They had heard the stories. They had heard what happened to people who made the wrong choice when offered an opportunity to disappear. Nicholas spoke quietly. His voice was not raised. It did not need to be. You have been stealing from this woman for 8 months. 67 instances of tip theft documented. You have threatened her employment if she reported your advances. You put your hands on her without permission on at least 5 occasions. The last one happening 3 minutes ago in this room. That ends now. Douglas tried to straighten, tried to access some reserve of dignity or defiance. I did not. She is lying. She is making this up because... Rocco. Make the call. Douglas's legs gave way. He collapsed to his knees on the wet tile floor, trembling like a cornered animal backed into a cage with no exit. Please. I will leave her alone. I will disappear. I will resign. I will never come near this hotel again. Just do not. Too late, Nicholas said. For you, the exit was 10 minutes ago. You walked past it when you locked this door. The rain pounded harder outside. Lightning cracked so bright it turned night into day. Douglas wept. He begged. He promised things he could not deliver and repented for sins that could not be forgiven. No one listened. Rocco was already on his phone, speaking in Italian, setting in motion the machinery that would erase Douglas Hale from the hospitality industry of Los Angeles and move him into a different category entirely, the category of people who disappeared. Nicholas turned to Mia one final time. We are leaving this hotel. You are not coming back here. I am taking you to a doctor to confirm that you are not injured. After that, we are going to the shelter to get Emma. She will come with us. Mia opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand. I am not offering choices. I am announcing decisions. You say yes or you say nothing. Which is it? She said nothing. She followed him out of that closet, away from Douglas Hale's sobs, away from the smell of bleach and broken glass, toward something that felt like safety, though safety seemed impossible for a woman with $78 in her bank account and a daughter sleeping in a shelter cot. 3 days passed. The Grandview Hotel's Grand Ballroom had been transformed for the Childcare Initiative Gala, a charity event where Los Angeles' wealthiest families gathered to write tax-deductible checks and photograph themselves writing them. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen tears. The temperature inside was precisely 72 degrees, maintained by systems that cost more than Mia's entire life. Mia moved between tables carrying trays of champagne flutes, her server uniform pressed and perfect, her hair braided back, her face neutral as a statue. She did not want to be here. Nicholas had insisted. She will be here, he had said that morning. Victoria Blackwell always attends this gala. I want her to see you. I want her to understand what she has lost. Now, walking past a table of venture capitalists in $1,000 suits, Mia understood that Nicholas had known what would happen. He had known that Victoria would use this public space, this crowd of witnesses, to strike. Mia realized she had walked into a trap, but not the kind she feared. A trap set for someone else. Victoria Blackwell glided across the ballroom like something designed in a laboratory to destroy confidence. She wore a floor-length gown of midnight blue silk, and at her throat hung a diamond pendant the size of a man's thumbnail. Her silver hair had been professionally arranged into something that suggested both innocence and predatory grace. She was 48 years old but looked 30. Money did that. She stopped directly in front of Mia's table, her eyes bright as broken glass. You. I know what you are trying to do. Victoria's voice was pitched low enough that only the surrounding tables heard her. Trying to trap Nicholas Bianchi with that child. Playing the desperate poor single mother, manipulating him with your neediness. The ballroom had not gone silent, but Mia felt it shift. Conversations continued, but attention redistributed. The energy of the room reorganized itself around this moment, this confrontation, this public execution of a woman who served champagne. Mia set down her tray on the nearest empty chair. Her hands were steady. She had discovered in the past 72 hours that she had no more fear left to give. Fear was expensive. She had spent her budget on Emma's safety and her own survival. I do not know what you are talking about, Mia said quietly. Emma is my daughter. Mine. And I will not let some desperate nobody use her to get money from a dangerous man. The word, nobody, landed like a fist. Around the ballroom, women in evening gowns turned to watch. Men in tuxedos pretended not to listen while listening with the intensity of hawk spotting movement in tall grass. Mia's voice did not shake. Emma is the child I have protected and fed and loved while you were nowhere to be found. You do not get to call me desperate. You do not get to call me anything. You gave up that right when you abandoned her. Victoria laughed. The sound was cruel and bright, a sound designed to fracture. Look at you. Walking to work. Living in a shelter. You are pathetic. The ballroom froze. Mia stood in her server uniform surrounded by women draped in jewelry and linens shipped from Europe. In her locker upstairs sat the foreclosure notice. In her wallet sat $78. In a shelter across the city sat her son, age 8, waiting for her to come home. All of this was true. All of it was shameful by the standards of the people in this room. But it was not shameful to Mia. She lifted her chin. I walked 6 miles in summer heat to work because I do not give up. I live in a shelter because I keep fighting. I count pennies because every single one matters when you are keeping your children safe. You call me pathetic? I call myself a mother. Which is more than you will ever be. The ballroom erupted. The sound was not polite applause. It was something older, something primal, a crowd recognizing truth spoken plainly, recognizing courage displayed by someone with nothing left to lose. Victoria's face transformed, her mouth opening, her hand rising. Then the main doors opened. 12 men in black suits entered the ballroom like a recitation of scripture. They moved with precision that suggested training, loyalty, and an absolute comfort with violence. They spread through the room, positioning themselves at every exit, every corner, every possible escape route. They did not interfere with the gala. They simply occupied it. Nicholas Bianchi walked in behind them. He wore a dark suit that cost more than most people's cars. His tie was silver silk. A gold watch caught the chandelier light on his left wrist. He moved through the crowd like someone walking through a funeral, present but separate, observing a ritual that no longer held meaning. He walked directly to Victoria Blackwell. Evelyn Blackwell. Also known as Victoria Bianchi. You are under arrest for child abandonment, fraud, and conspiracy to commit assault. Victoria's face went white, then purple, then a color that suggested her body was trying to achieve a state that did not exist in nature. You cannot do this. I have lawyers. I have money. I have evidence, Nicholas interrupted. Federal agents waiting in the service entrance. Your offshore accounts flagged by the SEC. Your new husband's money laundering operation documented by the FBI for 18 months. Your attempt to extort me using Emma as leverage, recorded and filed, admissible in every court in the country. He gestured to the men in black suits. 2 of them approached Victoria with handcuffs. She tried to run. They caught her before she reached the nearest exit. She screamed. She struggled. She begged for Nicholas by name, for mercy, for understanding. She clawed at her guard's arms, her manicured fingernails drawing lines of blood. This is not over, Nicholas. I will destroy you. I will take Emma. I will. No. You are done, he said flatly. They dragged her out of the ballroom, her screams echoing through the corridors of the hotel, fading as they reached the service elevators, fading as they descended into the basement, fading until the ballroom could return to its carefully maintained quiet. Nicholas turned to Mia. He did not touch her. He did not presume. Are you all right? She nodded, shaking slightly from adrenaline, from the weight of what had just happened, from the realization that her daughter's mother had been systematically dismantled in front of 300 witnesses and her own daughter did not have to witness it. Outside, in the rain-slicked streets of Los Angeles, Douglas Hale never made it to the police station. The black van that picked him up from his apartment carried him somewhere else entirely, to a warehouse in Long Beach where Alejandro Castellanos' soldiers taught him the difference between regret and actual pain. Death, when it finally came 3 days later, came as a mercy. But mercy was not what Nicholas had planned for Victoria. Federal agents took her into custody at dawn. Her mansion was raided before the sun rose. Her bank accounts were frozen. Her passport was revoked. The charges multiplied: child abandonment, fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy. The internet caught the story. By noon, the video of her public arrest was viral. By evening, every news outlet in Los Angeles had run the story. By the next morning, the entire country knew her name. She faced 40 years in federal prison. She faced poverty matching the kind that Mia had endured. She faced a future where no one in her social circle would acknowledge knowing her, where every advantage she had accumulated would be stripped away like layers of skin. Justice delivered without death. Justice delivered as systematic destruction. Justice delivered as the removal of everything she had ever believed defined her. That was worse than mercy. That was understanding. 1 week later, the apartment was quiet except for the sound of cardboard boxes being opened, tape being torn, the soft shuffle of a mother and 2 children reclaiming a home they thought they had lost forever. Mia Hartley stood in the center of the living room, holding a framed photograph of her mother. The glass was cracked across one corner. She did not remember when that happened. She set it carefully on the shelf above the radiator, where it caught the afternoon light. Emma and Thomas played on the floor with toys they had retrieved from storage, toys that had been packed away months ago when money stopped coming and hope became a luxury they could not afford. Emma had turned 8. Thomas was 5. Neither of them fully understood why their mother had been so afraid, only that the fear was gone now, replaced by something lighter that made her smile again. The apartment was smaller than it should have been for a family. The walls were thin. The heating system clanked and groaned like an old animal trying to remember how to move. But it was theirs. The foreclosure notice was gone. The debt collector's letter marked final notice had been replaced by a lease agreement signed by a lawyer she had never met, arranged by a man she was still trying to understand. The knock came at 4:15 in the afternoon, just as the light was turning golden through the west-facing window. Mia froze. Her body remembered fear before her mind could catch up. She had learned to flinch at doors, at sudden sounds, at the possibility of bad news arriving unannounced. She opened the door slowly. Nicholas Bianchi stood in the hallway alone. No guards. No lieutenants. No black SUVs visible through the stairwell window. He wore dark slacks and an open-collar white shirt, cashmere draped over his shoulders like something he had forgotten he was wearing. His scar caught the hallway light. His eyes were careful. "May I come in?" His voice was soft. A blade wrapped in velvet. Mia stepped aside without speaking. She did not trust herself to speak. Emma looked up from her toys, and her entire face transformed into something radiant. "It is the nice man from the shelter." She scrambled to her feet, abandoning her coloring book, her crayon scattering across the floor. "Do you remember me?" Nicholas crouched to her level. His hand shook. These were the hands that had signed documents ending men's lives, hands that had held pistols, hands that had built an empire through fear and violence. Now they trembled at the sight of his 8-year-old daughter. "Hello, Emma." His voice broke slightly on her name. "I remember you. You were drawing a picture of a dog. I was drawing a dog that was sad. But now I draw happy dogs." She thrust a piece of paper at him, a retriever in blue crayon standing in what might have been a field of purple flowers. "Do you want to color with me?" He looked at Mia, asking permission with the same careful respect he had shown her since the night in the ballroom. She nodded slowly. Nicholas sat on the floor of the small apartment, this man who controlled 12 city blocks and commanded loyalty through violence, holding a yellow crayon. Emma sat beside him, her small hand correcting his strokes. "You are going outside the lines, mister. You have to stay inside the lines or it does not look right." "You are right," he said. "I apologize." Thomas watched from the corner, suspicious of strangers the way children learn to be when stability is rare. But Emma's comfort with this man gradually softened the boy's wariness. By the time the sun had moved across the sky, Thomas was showing Nicholas the toy truck he had built from blocks, explaining its mechanics with the seriousness of a 5-year-old engineer. At 6 o'clock, Mia put Emma down for the night. The girl fell asleep instantly, exhausted from excitement. Thomas followed soon after, curled against a pillow that still smelled faintly of the shelter's industrial laundry soap. Nicholas stood on the small balcony when Mia joined him. The city sprawled below them, lights beginning to flicker on as dusk deepened. The evening air was cool enough to carry the smell of distant rain. "You need to tell me the truth," Mia said, standing beside him but not touching. She had learned the language of boundaries. "About Emma." Nicholas did not look away from the city. "She is my daughter." "I know that. Her mother, Victoria, took her 5 years ago. Disappeared completely. I have been searching ever since. Every contact, every resource, every dark corner of this city. Nothing. Then one afternoon, a woman walked into a shelter with 2 children, and I saw Emma's face, and I knew." Mia waited. The city hummed below them, millions of lives happening in parallel, each person carrying their own impossible weight. "But I did not reach out to you immediately," Nicholas continued. "Because you had built something real. You were rebuilding. And I was afraid that knowing the truth about Emma would destroy that. I watched you for 2 months before Douglas Hale's hands on you forced my hand. So you orchestrated everything. The hotel. The ballroom. Victoria's arrest. No. That was already in motion. Victoria had accumulated enemies long before you met her. The federal investigation was already underway. I simply accelerated the timeline. Made sure she was removed before she could hurt you again. Made sure Douglas Hale understood what happens to men who lay hands on people who matter." Mia turned to face him. "I cannot be part of your world, Nicholas. I cannot let my children grow up in the shadow of what you do. I cannot stand beside you at charity galas and pretend that blood is not on your hands." He nodded as if he had expected this. "I know. I am not asking you to be. I am asking for time. To be in Emma's life. And maybe," he paused, and something in his chest moved visibly, like a caged animal trying to break free. "And maybe to be in yours." Mia said nothing. The rain she had smelled began to fall, light at first, then heavier. Neither of them moved. "I will take whatever you are willing to give me," Nicholas said. "I will wait." 6 months passed in a sequence of small moments that accumulated into something larger than either of them had expected. Nicholas visited every Saturday afternoon, always asking permission before crossing the threshold. He brought groceries, expensive ones, which Mia made him understand she would not accept until he agreed to bring the ordinary kind, the food that a man who was learning to be ordinary would buy. He fixed the apartment's broken heater in a single afternoon, his expensive slacks stained with grease, his men waiting in cars outside, ignored. He played with Emma and Thomas. He read stories with voices that made them laugh. He never assumed, never pushed. He was learning something new, how to be present without demanding everything. How to give without expecting return. Mia rebuilt her life in the space he created. She took a job at a bookstore 3 blocks away, shelving books and recommending titles to strangers. She opened a savings account. She watched the balance grow week by week, $50, $100, $200. She stood straighter. She smiled with her whole face again. She was no longer desperate, no longer broken. She was equal. It was there, in the bookstore, that Nicholas finally spoke the words. He arrived at closing time, as the last customer was leaving, as Mia was pulling books from the return cart. The store smelled of aging paper and the coffee machine in the corner. The rain outside was soft, the kind that makes the city feel smaller, more intimate. "I need to tell you something," Nicholas said. Mia turned, shelving books still in her hand. His face was different in the bookstore's warm light. Younger, somehow. Softer. That night in the poker room, he continued, when you gave your blood without asking questions, without knowing who I was or what I could offer you in return, that changed everything. I spent 15 years becoming powerful so no child would suffer like I did. But I became the thing I hated. I became the weapon instead of the shield. Then you showed me there was another way to be strong. Nicholas? I am not asking for anything right now. I just needed you to know. You saved my life twice. Once with your blood. And again by showing me that true power is not about fear. It is about courage when you have nothing left. Mia set down the book. I do have something left. I have my children. I have my life. I have my dignity back. And maybe, she stepped closer. Maybe I have room for one more person. If that person keeps showing up the way you have. If he keeps being gentle when the world expects him to be hard. Nicholas reached for her hand. She took it. 3 years later, Emma turned 8 again, and this time there was a birthday party in a house that belonged to both of them. It was not a mansion, Mia had been firm about that, but it was warm and filled with light. Children from Emma's school scattered across the backyard. Families from the shelter where Mia still volunteered played games on the grass. And yes, Rocco and Dario wore party hats, looking deeply uncomfortable, watching the mafia boss grill hamburgers while his daughter climbed his back and his son hung from his arm. Mia stood on the porch, watching them. She thought of the woman counting $78 under a lamplight, walking 6 miles in summer heat, donating blood to a dying stranger. She thought of the foreclosure notice, the supply closet, the moment she refused to shrink. Nicholas caught her eye across the yard. He mouthed, "Thank you." For what? She mouthed back. For everything, he mouthed, and she knew he meant it, for the blood, for the courage, for showing him that power means nothing without humanity. The rain began to fall, gentle and warm, and no one left. They danced instead, all of them, the children and the adults and the reformed men in party hats, dancing in the rain while the city hummed around them. Mia never expected that one decision in an underground poker room would change her entire life. She never imagined that the child she protected at a shelter would be the key to unlocking both their futures. But that is the truth about small acts of courage, you never know which moment will matter. Which hand reached out in darkness will pull someone into light. If this story moved your heart, subscribe to us right now for more stories every single day. Drop a comment telling us which moment hit you hardest. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, that even in your darkest moment, you have the power to change everything with one act of courage, share this video with them today. Remember, true power is not about control. It is about choosing to be human when everything tells you not to be. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. We will see you in the next story. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.